everyone. Today I'm going to paint this map of Koh Lanta in my sketchbook, and in order to do that I'm going to use some tracing paper to transfer the outline from a map that I've downloaded into my sketchbook. I'm going to use an A4 size sheet of the tracing paper, and then I'm going to use blue tack to stick the tracing paper onto the page just so that it doesn't shift whilst I'm doing the transfer of the image. I'm going to use an 0.5 sized micron pen to do the outline. You can use pencil to do this outline, but I find the black line easier to see when transferring the image in the final stage. So I'm going to outline the border of the island using the pen, as well as the main road around the island and one or two of the main attractions that we went to whilst we were there. Next, I'm going to remove the tracing paper and make sure to turn it over. Once I've turned it over, I'm going to use a soft 4B pencil to lay down some graphite on the back of the page over the lines that I've already drawn. I find a soft pencil like a 4B works best for this, but you could use a 2B if you don't have a 4B. Now I will turn the tracing paper over again so that the graphite side is facing down and the ink pen side facing up. I'll stick that onto my sketchbook again using blue tack so that it doesn't shift, and then I will use a sharp pencil to draw over the ink lines that I've already drawn to get the map to transfer onto my sketchbook page. Because I've used blue tack to stick the tracing paper onto the page, I can lift it up every now and again to make sure that I've transferred the entire image before I remove the tracing paper from the page. Once I'm happy that I've got the whole sketch traced, I can remove the tracing paper and now move to a 0.5 micron pen to go over the lines again in my sketchbook. The 0.5 sized Pigma micron pen that I'm using is a waterproof pen, so the ink won't run when I put the watercolor layer down. Just make sure that any pen that you use has got waterproof or archival ink inside. The sketchbook I'm using today is a fabric covered book that I made myself using Baohong 100% cotton paper inside. If you are interested in seeing how I make a sketchbook like this, then let me know in the comments below and I'll put together a tutorial on that. Today for my watercolor, I'm going to use my Mungyo set of 48 student grade colors. I've got two silver black velvet round point brushes in size 8 and 12, a palette for mixing, a spray bottle, eraser, tissue paper and water. Once my inkwork is completely dry, I'm going to erase the pencil lines and then mist my paints with some water to activate them. I'm going to start with the land areas of the map first, and to do this I'm going to use the wet in wet technique. I'm going to mix up a very weak mix of olive green, almost entirely water with just a little bit of pigment that's left on my brush, and I'm going to put that in the area of the landmass. I'm going to keep adding water to my brush as well as the tiniest bit of pigment here and there, just so that I can get some moisture down on the green land. As long as I can retain the wetness in this area, I'm going to be able to dot in thicker consistency of paint once my base layer is down and whilst it is still wet. So on this top island area here, as soon as I've got my base layer down, whilst it's still wet, I'm going to mix a slightly thicker consistency of the olive green and then dot that in the center of the island to get a bit of a change in texture. This is where a bit of knowledge on the wet and wet technique is going to come into play, because the amount that the paint spreads is really going to depend on the amount of water that you've already got on the page, as well as the consistency of the paint that is on your brush. If your page is too wet or the paint on your brush is too watered down, then when you drop this color in, it's going to spread almost all the way to the edges and give you a uniform consistency once again, which you don't want. But if your paper is slightly drier or the paint on your brush is slightly thicker, then the paint that you drop down now won't spread quite as far. And so this is where just a little bit of practice will come in to get the right amount of spreading for what it is that you're trying to achieve. I am now going to do exactly the same technique for the South Island. As I'm starting to lay down the water layer on the South Island, I can see that the color that I've dropped in on the North Island is blending a little bit too far. So I'm going to clean and dry off my brush slightly and then lift some of the paint around the edges. As I mentioned before, this is a map of the island of Koh Lanta in Thailand. I've just come back from a week's holiday there last week. We stayed in the most charming fishing village very close to Lanta Old Town on the east coast of the island. There aren't really tourist beaches on the east coast of Koh Lanta. Those are all found up the west coast of the island. But we stayed right in amongst the fishermen's cottages, which was a fabulous experience in itself. The North Island that I painted first has little to no tourist activity whatsoever, and all the tourist attractions and places to stay are all on the South Island. Because the best beaches are on the west coast, there are the most accommodations and hotels on the west coast, with the majority of them being up towards the top of the west coast. The East Island is, by comparison, a lot quieter, which I really prefer, as I try to stay away from the large tourist hubs in any place that I go. So I'm just continuing to work on the South Island here, and as the color starts to dry, I will just keep on adding in my medium to thicker consistency of the olive green into the center, just to keep trying to get as much contrast as I possibly can. The Airbnb place where we stayed in Koh Lanta is called Wooder House, and as its name suggests, the entire thing was made of wood. There were ample hammocks and beds and couches on both levels of the house, which afforded us spectacular views of the sunrise every morning. We got awoken very early every morning by the sound of the call to mosque, as well as the roosters in the neighborhood, and also the fishermen in the nearby cottages who always have an early start. But I didn't mind this at all, as I'm an early riser myself, and I got to enjoy the sunrise every day. Here you can see our fishermen neighbors who are hard at work every day, and you can also see the contrasting difference between the high tide and the low tide in the water in front of us, and how it changed every day. This is an area of people who live a very simple life with very little means to make an income. They eat what they catch and sell what they can. I've decided that I want to add some even darker green to my islands than what I've already got. In order to do that, I need to wait for my painting to be completely dry before I go on to this next stage. And when it's dry, I'm going to put down water first and again work wet and wet, but put in some even darker green than I already have down in the center. I'm going to use the olive green that I already have, but then I'm going to add some cobalt blue to it to make it even darker. I'm going to mix that in a medium consistency and then drop it into the center of the islands. So I prepare my darker green color, and once that is ready, I will put some plain clean water down into the top island and then drop my darker green into there. And once that's done, I'll work on the South Island. I'm taking care to only drop this into the center, and if it bleeds out towards the edges, to lift the edges with a clean brush so that I retain that contrast of the lightest greens on the edge and the darkest green on the inside. Any time that I can put more contrast into any of my sketches, I'm going to take the opportunity to do that. The more that you can get a bigger difference between the lightest lights and the darkest darks on your sketch, the more impact it's going to have and the more three-dimensional it's going to look. Not that this is three-dimensional, but it will make it look like there is a hill in the center of the island, which there is. I also know that my sketch is always going to dry lighter, so I always make it a little bit darker than my intention because I know that it will end up lighter. Whilst that dries, let me show you my favorite beach on Koh Lanta. We parked on the side of the road, and this is the trail down to Nui Beach. This is just one of the many beaches on the west coast of Koh Lanta. It's more to the south of the island, and the more south you go, the less tourists there will be. For the first while, this fisherman was the only other person on the beach other than us, and I found that surprising because we were there in the middle of high season. Parts of the island like this make me think that this must be what large parts of Thailand must have been 15 or 20 years ago before they became so developed. After we had spent some time on the beach and in the water, we went up to the restaurant that overlooked the beach and had something to eat and drink there. Once the green area of the sketch is completely dry, it's time to start working on the blue. I quickly changed from my size 8 to my size 12 round brush just so that I could get more water on the page more quickly. I'm going to avoid the land areas and lay water down all around the edge of the islands where I plan for the water to go. Once I've done that, I'm going to mix up quite a medium to thick consistency mix of ultramarine. I'll put that around the edge of the island and allow it to blend out in the water. It's going to blend quite a bit because I'm dropping it in onto quite a wet page, but that's fine. I'm going to do the same as I did with the land, and that is put a lighter layer down first, and as it starts to dry, I will come in around the edges again with a thicker consistency of the ultramarine close to the edge of the island so that I get a little bit of a graduated blue from dark to light. I really enjoy sketching and painting maps. They make an excellent first page for a travel sketchbook. It's a nice easy way to really break that first page that we often feel that we are quite intimidated to start a new sketchbook because we think that we're going to mess up the first page. That's hardly ever the case with a map. They're always easy to do nicely. And it's nice to be able to show people all the places that you've been to when they're having a look through your travel sketchbook. I'm going to make sure to let this whole thing dry completely before I come in and do my ink work. And for that, I'm going to use a 0.5 sized micron pen with permanent ink inside of it to do the names and the labels around the island. And I'll swap to a slightly thicker pen for the bigger letters. I'm going to use marker pens that I've got, and I'm going to mark out the road around the island more clearly in red. This is a stamp set that I bought on Temu that I really enjoy, and it's great to be able to put headings on pages using the stamps. And then I haven't added text to this sketchbook so far, but it was very poignant to me that we arrived on Koh Lanta exactly 20 years to the date after the Boxing Day tsunami of 2004. There are reminders of this event all around the island, and it really just did sit with me the whole time that we were there. So I decided to add a few sentences about this in the sketchbook. This is a photograph supplied by my friend Susanna, which shows the devastation of the exact area that we were staying in. And this photograph shows all that was left of the pier that we could see from our house after the tsunami that day. These tsunami warning signs are now all over the island, and I decided to include this sketch in the little space that was left at the bottom of the page. And there's the final page sketch. Thank you for joining me today. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, and I'd love to hear from you in the comments section below. Until next time, bye for now.